THS Morning Show with Mr. Brenner and Mrs. Keating.
Good morning, Trojans, and welcome to the Morning Show with Mr. Brenner and Mrs. Keating with today's super special guest, Mrs. Brenner. She is not only the TIS Librarian and our high school yearbook advisor and our super amazing speech and debate. What would that be considered? Our coordinator? What is it?
Yearbook teacher, speech and debate coach.
Coach, that's what it is, coach. But also, Mr. Brenner's awesome day.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
My internet connection is unstable, so I don't know how things are going, but for a little bit there, you cut out. So that's just living in the life of Zoom and COVIDs, but I'm really excited to have you on the show today, Mrs. Brenner. You're a very important person to me, so I'm really, really excited to have you on the show with us today.
I felt like that deserved a really big ah.
So good morning to everyone and happy Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. We are now in December of 2020. We're almost through this year, which everyone, and especially Mrs. Brenner, I know likes to call the year of the dumpster fire.
It sure is. That's so appropriate.
If you would, please stop, stand, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now please join me in a moment of silent meditation. Thank you. On to you, Mrs. Keating, for our announcements.
All right, just a few quick announcements. School is set to return for in-person instruction on December 7th, Monday, or actually Tuesday, right? Is it Monday or Tuesday?
The 7th is Monday.
Monday, December 7th, and athletic practices are also set to return on that date. So I know that's super exciting for everybody to get back to a little bit of normalcy. And to you, Mr. Brenner, with the news.
Today in the news, stocks have been trending upward recently. This is a good sign that the economy is starting to get a little bit stronger. Joe Biden is expected to announce his economic team today. He has expressed that this group should help to respond to economic difficulties due to COVID. Dr. Scott Atlas, a controversial COVID advisor under the Trump administration, has resigned. And that's all for news.
Some super exciting things in the world of sports. Penn State finally gets their first win against Michigan, 27-17 this weekend. Not so exciting and really annoying that people can't follow the NFL COVID protocols, that the Steelers and Ravens have been postponed for the third time to Wednesday at 3:40. 3:40 in the afternoon, they've had this postponed to. Want to know why that is, Mr. Brenner?
Why is that?
The Rockefeller Center tree lighting.
Uh-huh.
That's why. Yeah. So it was originally postponed because the Ravens strength and conditioning coach wasn't following COVID protocol. So I really feel like because they weren't following COVID protocol, they should have to forfeit the game. That's the original thought process. Since then, though, many players have been sent on the COVID IR list and have tested positive, and that's including the Ravens quarterback, Lamar Jackson. So some of the players are back. It doesn't look like Lamar Jackson will be back for Wednesday. It's been a little bit crazy. It is a huge weekend for women in college sports this weekend. In college men's football, Vanderbilt kicker Sarah Fuller makes history as the first woman to appear in a Power 5 college football game. She's a goalie for the Vanderbilt University of the college women's soccer team as a goalie, but she appeared for the Vanderbilt men's college football team as their kicker this weekend because of all the COVID positive cases and guys on their COVID IR team. She got to be on their team this week, and she said it was just a huge day for women in sports, and she got to appear and be on their team and be their place kicker this weekend. So that's pretty neat.
That's really cool. That's really neat.
Cool stuff. Cool stuff. How about this day in history, Mr. Brenner?
Back in 1941, the first Civil Air Patrol was organized in the United States. A year later, in 1942, national gasoline rationing goes into effect in our country. In 1955, Rosa Parks refuses to sit in the back of a Montgomery, Alabama bus, defying the South's segregationist laws. And in 1981, the AIDS virus was officially recognized. And that's all for this day in history. To you for weather.
All righty. Today we have a high of 42 degrees, cloudy and cooler with a bit of snow and rain at times. Tonight we'll see a low of 30 degrees and cloudy with snow showers. They're saying that there's Western Pennsylvania, the western part of the state, it's coming towards us, Mr. Brenner. So we'll see what happens. I keep just thinking that our new tires, they're just waiting to get a little bit of snow on them.
You got your new tires.
I do. We're ready to go.
Yeah.
We
All
both
right.
have our new tires. They're ready to go.
Ready to go.
The Northern Tier ready.
It's exciting.
All right. How about a COVID-19 update? It's looking a little better up here right now. We're not sure. Mr. Brenner and I were just having this discussion. We're never quite sure. Is it a gap in the reporting numbers, or we're being hopeful that we're getting a little bit better up here?
Yeah, actually, our last report, when we last spoke to you guys, Bradford County was number 10 for infection rate in the state out of 67 counties. So that was not good. That means that we had a high infection rate. Since we've last had our morning show, we are now at number 63 out of 67. So we don't exactly know what happened with that data or those numbers, but we've gone from number 10 to number 63. So that's a very good change. The other thing is, this is a positive change. For every 10,000 people, now 4.3 will become infected each day. That was like at 6 or 7 in our previous report. So that's also down a little bit. So as far as Bradford County is concerned, we are trending in a positive direction. As far as the world's concerned, it's expected that the COVID vaccine will be ready for use by June 2021. So what they're saying is they expect that if you are wanting to get if you are an adult and you are not in specific classes of people that can't get the vaccine, by June 2021, anyone should be able to get the vaccine. So that's promising as well. Then also some new news in COVID. Scientists believe that COVID may have been present in the United States a little bit earlier than expected. They believe that it may have been here in December 2019 rather than when we thought it arrived in January. So we'll just hope for continuous good progression and the vaccine coming along, and hopefully our county continues to head in the right direction. We had some real tough times, in the last few weeks, but now it looks like things are getting a little better.
Fingers crossed.
Okay.
All right.
Well, now we have our favorite segment of the show, which is our guest. So welcome to our guest, Mrs. Brenner, my wife. Hello.
Yay.
How are you guys?
Wonderful. So glad to have you this morning, Mrs. Brenner. Always the bright spot in the end of my day. Usually when I'm having, I know that when Mrs. Brenner hits our building at the end of the day, I know she's here for yearbook when I see her smiling face, and I'm usually, a little crazy at that point in the day, and she usually peeks her head around and gives me a smile and a kind word, or if my door's closed, she gives a little wave, and that makes me feel great that I know we're getting towards the end of our day. So it's always great to see her face. Yes.
Like at the end of the day, I feel like I need to go to the high school, and I'm like, oh no, we're online. I don't have to.
No, we're all excited to get back to normalcy, and I'll be happy to see your smiling face then for sure.
So speaking of yearbook, Mrs. Brenner, how's your collection? We've been announcing for you, Mrs. Keating specifically has been announcing for you every morning for the last week or so about hunting photos and such things for your yearbook. How is your collection of those things going?
They're going very well. I was talking with Mrs. Dibble, and she's got a lot of collections coming. We're still looking for the hunting photos, especially now that hunting season is in full swing, and any hunting photos go. Like, even if you're fishing, that counts as hunting. So we would love to have those photos. We're also looking for photos of you working from home and like what your setup looks like, how you've got it all looking, and what what you've been doing outside of schoolwork, outside of Keola. So if you've got fun activities that you've been doing outside of hunting or schoolwork, definitely send us pictures of what you've been doing there too, because we've got a whole segment in the yearbook set up for that as well.
You know, we had a great, somebody was telling us that there's kids crafting and, you know, doing all these wonderful things. Like, we want to see all of that, right? Like, we love that. I know I am not a very creative and imaginative person. I appreciate people who are. So I'm really like, I want to see those things, you know, so that's wonderful. We want to see all those things. Send them to us, right?
Oh, for sure. Mine would probably like me with my nose stuck in a book.
Yeah, right. That's how I am too. I want to read all the things and that's for sure. That's how I am too. I want to read and listen to things.
Although Mr. Brenner can tell you, like I have a habit of, and his mom can tell you as well. I have a habit of like thinking I'm going to be awesome and go out and like be creative, and I get all this fabric for quilting, and then I get it home and that's where it stays. Like, it does nothing from there. And I don't know if it's a it's a failure in my brain to like compute that you have to actually do the quilting yourself. Because I've got all this Christmas material to make a really cool quilted tree skirt, and it's beautiful, and it's still in the bag.
My mom is an amazing seamstress and sewer, and I wish that that's something that I paid attention to. I need to make the time to sit down with her and learn something of that sort, because, and quilting would be something I would love. I imagine there's probably some sort of calm and relaxation in that. I should probably learn that before my stress level gets way too out of whack.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. The part that I struggle with, this is terrible to say, the part that I struggle with was the math, because there's so much math involved, at least in the beginning, and the calculations and the measurements. And Mr. Brenner has tried to like teach me how to measure things, and I don't have the brain capacity sometimes to like just to focus and retain it. Like, there's other things that I retain, like how to make really good coffee.
Oh, and that's where we bonded. Our first bonding was over coffee, Mrs.
Priority.
For sure. Oh, we love it.
Okay, so Mrs. Brenner, where is this photo? Who's this handsome guy here?
Oh, I don't know who that is.
But I think is that Piper in there?
That is Piper. She's trying to jump out.
Oh yeah, you right there. There's our dog. Kind of hard to see.
This is what is it? Lake Hammond? I think it's Hammond or Tioga, one of the two. Where you and I go kayaking a lot. Mm-hmm. And I just Dan likes to, like, Mr. Brenner likes to go fishing, and you can see his fishing pole right there. He's got it trailing behind him. He always packs a fishing pole for me, and I don't know. I just like to kayak. I just like to like sit in my little boat and float around. And then he'll take Piper, and he'll keep Piper in her boat because she won't stay in my boat. She'll try to like jump out of my boat and into the river. But for some reason, she listens to Mr. Brenner.
Kayaking is a good activity for both of us because I like adventure and like excitement and fun. And like there's a little bit of that with the kayaking and fishing. And you can see in this photo, I'm like, I don't know what, I'm exploring something, figuring out what's over there. And Mrs. Brenner likes like calm, peace, and tranquility, and appreciating nature. And I like that too. But like this photo sort of shows that, and that's why this is a good activity for both of us, because I can get some of that like adventure, excitement, exploration, and Mrs. Brenner can get the calm, peaceful tranquility, and you get a little bit of both in that activity. So it's one of our preferred things to do.
I just went kayaking, and there was this like little divot area, and I was like, there's just trash back there. And Mr. Brenner was like, let's go check it out. And I was like, there's literally just trash back there. Like, let's go over here where it's a little calmer and nicer. And he's like, let's go explore that. This is our kayaking trip.
I like that it also represents, this picture kind of represents everything, because you also have your John Deere hat on, which we were just talking about previously.
Gotta represent.
Represent. I love it.
All right, you guys ready to go through some photos?
We are. I love it.
What did you put in?
All right.
Ooh, yay.
Tell us about these.
So the upper left and the bottom right are both the Denali Range from Talkeetna, Alaska. Talkeetna, Alaska is about 2 hours north of Anchorage. It's where my mom lives. It's beautiful in the winter. You can see in the bottom right, it's super cold that day. There's a lot of hoarfrost, which is where it gets below freezing and below 10 degrees, sometimes below 0. And then you get this beautiful thick white frost on it. And I love when the trees have that. It's just gorgeous. Upper left is a pull-off in Talkeetna. You can see the road going right down into Talkeetna, the town. It's like, it's a one-stop sign town. It's lovely. We used to visit there in the summer times, and then my mom loved it so much she moved there. So we get to go visit her all the time there. Upper right is a camping trip that Mr. Brenner and I took in our tent. You can see our little camping chairs. That was in Seward, Alaska, which is 2 hours south of Anchorage. And it's beautiful. It's got a little inlet where a lot of whales go to hang out. And I don't know that they're breeding necessarily there. I've never seen any there, but I've heard that like killer whales frequently will hang out in there and just relax. And then the bottom left is halfway between Anchorage and Fairbanks. We're actually in the Denali National Park area, surrounded by the range. And I'm standing on a huge boulder that we drove up to.
Okay, so everybody thinks Alaska, and the first thing they think is that bottom right picture, that it's just freezing, freezing cold, but you only have a sweatshirt on, and it looks pretty like, you have an open tent there. But tell us about the weather. Tell us the reality of Alaska weather.
It's balmy. It depends on where you are in Alaska, because Alaska is the largest state, right? It's 2 times as large as Texas, which sounds weird. But when you put it over the state of, over the entire map of the United States, it reaches from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast with all of the islands that come off of Alaska. And it's beautiful during the summer. It's nice and 70 to 80 degrees. Anchorage actually got to 90 degrees this last summer. It was insane. And in Alaska, we don't have air conditioners because it's Alaska. So they actually had to order in air conditioners, and they were on back order for a lot of people because it was the first summer where we had hit 90 degrees and we really needed it. The other thing about Alaska in the summer is you get up to 24 hours of daylight in certain areas above the North Slope. So in Keating, formerly known as Barrow, Alaska, it's at the very tip top of Alaska. They'll get 24 hours of daylight and 24 hours of near darkness in the winter. So it's interesting for them, especially because it's never super warm or super, it'll get super cold, but it won't get super warm even though they have 24 hours of daylight. Anchorage is where the majority of people live because it's more in between, balmy, and it's a bowl, so all the weather just kind of goes right over. It's not terrible. But a lot of people do think like the bottom right is what it is.
Right.
I mean, from November until April, it'll have snow or some amount of snow. But for the most part, like what you see on the left, like that's what I wore in Alaska. Like I wore a hoodie and some jeans. Like you just layer up. You just have to be smart about it.
How cold do you think it was in that photo?
In that photo, I want to say it was about 36 degrees.
And then what's the coldest that you've ever experienced?
-30. No, that's a lie. That's a lie. Because I went to Fairbanks in December. It was December 18th, and I was in Fairbanks. And in my rear view mirror, it had a temperature gauge, and it stopped at -30. And I was like, oh, that's really nice for Fairbanks. And I got out, and I realized that's as low as my temperature gauge in my car went. It was actually -62. And I had frost on the inside of my windshield. So Fairbanks gets very cold.
That's my worst nightmare.
But like you don't hang out a lot outside. Like, and if you do, you just dress really warm for it. You prepare for it.
A cool thing about Fairbanks is that at all of the grocery stores and places where you take your car to buy your essentials, they have outlets in the parking lot so that you can plug your your car's engine in so it doesn't get so cold that it won't start. So every parking lot has outlets at every parking spot so you can plug your car in to keep it warm.
Oh, that's neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost a requirement. I remember like for my trip to Fairbanks where it was like negative 62, 63, my tires actually like froze to the ground. And so because the air in the tire wasn't warm, it went clunk, 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 clunk until the air in the tire warmed up and it rounded out again. It was the weirdest sensation. It was really cool.
Wow, where is this at?
This is north of the Denali National Park. The mountain range right there, that's actually part of the Denali Range. And then this is just a river.
Wow.
We had gone RV camping for my birthday. And so we rented this huge RV with some friends and we pulled over here because we needed a break. And it was just gorgeous. I had to take a picture. And it was about, I want to say 15 degrees that day.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the end of that RV trip and the excitement that we had?
So we left on my birthday and I drove a lot. And I think we drove the entire day. And when we left, we got all the way to my friend's house in Wasilla, which is 45 minutes north of Anchorage, right? And so in order to get back to Anchorage, you have to drive up from her house into Wasilla and then back down into the inlet towards Anchorage. And as we're leaving her house, our friend who's in the car goes, "Oh, I just got a freezing rain advisory." And we were like, "What?" Like, we've had no freezing rain. All the roads in Alaska, like, we don't salt the roads ever. We just put down some gravel and you learn to drive on the ice or the snow or both. So we're in an RV that doesn't have four-wheel drive. It doesn't have studded tires. It doesn't have winter tires. I don't even think they were all-terrain. And we're driving onto the highway and Mr. Brenner is slowing down and all of a sudden, like, we're veering off the road. And I was like, are you braking? And he was like, "I'm braking." And I was like, are you steering? And he's like, "I'm steering." And the wind was pushing us off the road. And because of the ice, it just kept sliding. And we drove like that for about 15, 20 minutes. And we passed a couple of cars that had driven or slid actually off the road into a ditch on either side. It was treacherous and terrifying. And that was the last 40 minutes of the trip. Everything else was fine. The weather was fine. The roads were fine up until the last 40 minutes. And then we decided, because of how bad it was, we were just going to drop the RV off and call it a day.
Big ice storm.
If I seem obsessed with snow tires and weather and things like that, it's because I am now, because the last 15 years of my teaching career, I lived seriously less than 10 minutes away from work for 15 years. So my car really, and I have a garage. So coming here was a really big, and we had snow days. So I didn't go to work and I didn't drive in the snow and I didn't have to. So changing to here and driving away, it's been a really big difference. So I hear things now, and now driving in this, it's such a big difference for me now. So hearing those things now, I'm like crazy.
Oh, and it cracks and for me, it cracks me up because it's such a different driving experience going from, like, I learned to drive in the ice, in the snow.
Right.
I learned how to fishtail. Like, you had to prepare because those are all real situations, even with four-wheel drive, even with studded tires in Alaska.
And that's what my life was. That's what my life was before that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we came here and everyone was like, "Oh, the roads are so bad." And I'm like, no, they're not. Like, I can see the road. In Alaska, you have a game that you play in the middle of winter, in Anchorage especially, where it's like, which lane am I in? Because you go from having 5 lanes to there's 3 lanes all of a sudden, but they're all like interweaving because we plow, but the snow just keeps coming and we never get down to actual road until around May.
Yeah, they just get a thick coating of like icy packed snow. And like Mrs. Brenner said, they don't salt because, first of all, it's too cold for the salt to actually work. It makes it more slippery. And then they have what's called breakup season, right? So when I moved there, I was like, oh God, we're heading into breakup season. This can't be good.
Because we're breaking up with winter.
Yeah. But the breakup really, Mrs. Brenner, right, is just when all of that like crusty, icy, slushy snow breaks apart and then goes away and melts, and you can see the lanes in the road again, and everything is getting better.
Yeah, there's two terms that you learn when you go to Alaska, at least when you move there. The first is termination dust, which is the first dusting of snow on the mountains. So at the very tip top of this mountain, where it's a little lighter, that's what we would call termination dust. That means you have about 6 weeks at the maximum before it actually touches the ground where you are. And then breakup season is what everybody looks forward to, kind of, because we're breaking up with winter. It means the ice is starting to melt. But the worst part about breakup season is because the ice is melting, the snow is melting, and it's all turning brown and icky and gross, and everything is just slush. But then it'll freeze. So then you have like broken patches and cracks in the ice, and it's my least favorite season in Alaska.
I listened to you guys talk about that and I laughed because I thought it was bad when I was learning how to drive. My dad was a truck driver and he taught me how to drive and all that. And he would take me out in the worst conditions. Like he pulled the wheel on me in ice and took me out in the rain. And I thought that was terrible, but it was great when I was learning how to drive because I learned how, but I didn't have to for so long. Well, now I do. So it's like I'm learning how to drive in the snow all over again.
Oh yeah, it's and every snow is different. Like in Alaska, we have a really dry snow. Here, it's a really wet snow. Right. So also, like in Alaska, where I lived, and a lot of the places, like you don't get a lot of wind, so it's not as cold. It doesn't feel as cold. Here, it feels so cold because you've got the wet snow, and then you have the wind chill. So you combine both of those, and it's colder than it's been in Keating, Alaska, or Fairbanks sometimes. Like it feels colder.
Right.
Like Fairbanks could be -40, but you don't have wind. So it's just like, ooh, that's a little chillier.
Right. Crazy. Oh, look how beautiful this is. Where's this at?
This is right in Talkeetna, looking at the Denali Range from one of the rivers. And that's the Susitna, I think. And where I'm sitting, I'm silhouetted. That area has actually eroded significantly. And the part that I'm sitting on actually eroded last summer. And this picture was taken 2 summers ago.
That looks like a totally different time of the year.
Oh yeah, that was June. That's May 30th, June 1st.
Right.
It's beautiful. I was there for my sister's wedding.
Nice.
So speaking of erosion, there's a lot of interesting things that happen geologically in Alaska. One of the things that I found interesting is when I first met you, your dad had a house that was surrounded by a lot of land. Now, currently, your dad has a house that is not surrounded by a lot of land. Can you tell us what happened there?
About
Same house.
6 or 7 years ago. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago now. Yeah, because you and I have been married that long. He lives right on the river, right on Willow Creek, and we had a lot of snow the previous winter, and it had all melted at the same time, which is not necessarily normal. Usually we have time in between, and it all melted at the same time, and then we got a whole bunch of new snow that melted as well. And because of that, the river actually overflowed, and when it overflowed, the sand that these houses, the bedrock and stuff, it wasn't as stable as it should have been because it was just clay. And so it melted, actually, like it literally melted away from the shore. And so these houses actually like went down the river. And my dad went from having 4 or 5 houses in front of him across the river to having no houses across the river because he had riverfront property. So now you can look out from his house and you can see the river.
Yeah, not the houses. And the houses they just like washed down the river. They floated down, and
he was afraid that his was going to go too because he's got a creek that runs halfway through his yard. And so he was watching that overflow, and it was really concerning because the land that his house is on, we weren't sure if it was the same kind of clay or if it was more stable, and apparently it's a little more stable. But his house still, because of how moisturized the ground was, his house actually sank. And so he's been dealing with that since we moved. He just got it rebuilt, got the base of it rebuilt this year. So that's good. Now
A
it's
lot,
bad again.
a lot of buildings in Alaska are not level anymore. When they first built them, they're level, and then due to all sorts of the geological things, including earthquakes and moisture in the ground and stuff, they end up kind of like tilting sideways, and it takes adjustment. And it's kind of a unique thing when you visit, but you'll find a lot of buildings that are not level.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of that is brought up because of the tectonic plates that Alaska is built on, and then it's also on the Ring of Fire. So you have a lot of earthquakes there. 2 years ago yesterday, they had one of the biggest quakes that they've had, and the roads sank while people were driving on them, and it was treacherous. But because of how the buildings are built, because of the building codes that they've erected and the requirements that are built around that, no one was actually harmed, which is amazing, because you look at the pictures of the damage and it was insane. The 2018 quake was treacherous, and they had earthquakes, like mini little quakes afterwards, not even just aftershocks, but like actual mini quakes for, I want to say, 6 to 7 months after, and they'd have one at least every day.
That was really scary. I remember we couldn't get a hold of your dad. His road was blocked in. We weren't sure if he was okay. We were hearing it from here in Troy that there was big earthquakes. It was you're right, that was a scary time.
Mm-hmm.
That is scary.
Yay!
So,
look at these guys.
I love it.
Oh my goodness, look how close you are with that moose.
Yeah, so don't touch the moose, don't feed the moose, don't pet the moose, do not come near the moose. That's the that's the goal.
But
what you see in
supposed
the upper two photos are actually at a conservation center where they take these moose in and they rescue them. So the one on the right, his name is Toke, and you're actually allowed to feed him. Like, you can't pet him, but you can feed him. And that's my, like, oh my gosh, that was my dream come true. That was
look, he's smiling at you.
He was so pretty, and he was huge. So I'm 5'1" on a good day, and on this moose, I didn't even come up to his shoulder.
Oh my gosh.
He was insanely tall. So in the picture on the left, where you see the mountain in the background, the moose in the forefront, I don't even remember the moose that's eating, what his name was, but Toke is the other one. Toke is the one that's walking over.
What is that bear looks like? He's serious business.
So even though I lived in Alaska for 14 years, I had never seen a bear until like the year we moved. So right before we moved, we went on a driving trip and we saw 4 black bear. Never seen a bear. And then this was the day that we drove out of Alaska. We had just hit the Yukon in Canada, and there was a huge grizzly bear right off the side of the road. And I was like, you gotta slow down. So I took this photo, and he was like heading towards the row. He was massive.
He's on a mission. Like, he's going to do something. Like,
but he didn't look intimidated. Like, he was not scared of cars at all. And in the bottom left, the high school that we taught at, we had windows all the way around, and we had this beautiful wooded area. And during the springtime, this moose specifically would come and give birth right outside those windows. And we would sometimes have black bears that would come and like chase them away or try to eat them. So the last day of school was always a little treacherous because we knew that Mama Bear was out and we knew that Mama Moose was out. And this was 2 years before we left. Mama had twins, and this was right outside of my classroom window, and I just sat and watched her. It was the coolest thing.
We'd have delays where we wouldn't be able to leave school right away. They'd hold the kids back for a little while because there'd be bears chasing moose and it was dangerous outside. Then we got the principals and security guards trying to go out there and assess the situation and chase them off so the kids could leave. It was quite interesting.
Yeah. You'd be waiting for the end of the day bell to ring, and all of a sudden they would be like, please do not use the green hall doors to exit. Use only the bus doors. We have a mama bear chasing Mama Moose through the woods.
That is amazing.
Also, don't use yellow hall doors because Mama Bear's cubs are in the trees. In Alaska.
So here's some other photos we have. Some camping photos. I like the one that you have down here on the bottom, that long one. It's like a panorama.
Yeah, that was off of Willow Fish Hook. That was a lake that you and I found.
Mm-hmm. Here's our old,
sure you can't get there at all.
yeah. There's this lake here. We're hiking on a lake, right? And this is our old dog Tigger, who's since died, but we miss Tigger.
He doesn't look so sure.
Yeah,
He's
we're
like,
happy.
what are you guys doing to me?
Tigger's not so sure.
I was terrified on that trip. I don't look it in that photo, but I was so petrified that we were just gonna fall through the ice. I knew it was safe because other people had like driven their snowmobiles out there and stuff, but I was not. I was still like, okay, walk safely.
Couple more kayaking photos. There's Tigger again.
My little buddy. Proof that I kayak.
This is a neat photo. This is another kayaking photo. We were out camping on an island, and this lady from Canada snapped this photo and eventually emailed it to us.
Mm-hmm. The only photo that you and I have of us kayaking together that I have not taken. It was beautiful.
All right, what do you have here, Diane?
This is our everyday life outside of school. So this is our farm in Western New York. And on the left, we've got one of the back 60 acres, one of the fields down. So I'm in between 2 rows of Timothy hay, and it's drying. It's been raked and tedded and raked again. So it's just drying, and we're gonna bale it the next day. The middle photo is you and I, you on the very tall ladder, you and I trimming apple trees in March, April at the farm. And then the far right is one of my favorite photos of our barn.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh, yay. More farm photos. So we've got Mr. Brenner on the tractor with the baler, and he's baling up the hay. And then the bottom middle picture is my favorite tractor, Johnny. Oh, I love that tractor. It's so gorgeous.
Do they all have names?
Yeah. Except for the International. It's just the International.
Which is not a John Deere.
No, no one cares about it.
Poor kid. Oh,
Yeah.
We've got Johnny, we've got JD, we've got the loader, we've got
who named them? Did your dad name them, or did you name them?
When I was
named was the GT.
Well, before I was born, my grandfather bought a couple John Deere tractors. He bought a John Deere M, which was a little tractor, and a John Deere 60, which was a big tractor. So they ended up calling those Little John and Big John.
Okay.
So those were the first named tractors. And then after that, we've just continued to name them. And this Johnny here that you see, which is Diane's favorite tractor in her favorite photo, is a John Deere 2510.
It's fun.
I still feel like the best part of coming here, and the most surprising things I was asked that I wasn't prepared for, was the first day that I was here that I was asked twice what my favorite tractor was. I was prepared for a lot of things to be asked, but that I was not prepared for. And I'm like, well, they're like, well, what color? And I'm like, I was not prepared for that.
Green.
I now know the correct answer, according to the Brenners, is you just say green and you just say John Deere.
Gotta be John Deere green.
Well, I just remember seeing John Deere in Dan's office, so I say that's my answer.
It's John Deere green.
My brother has since told me I have Kubotas and that's what you do, but I say I don't know. He tells me, but I don't know.
I love a tractor that runs.
Who knows though? Who knows?
Does what it's supposed to. My favorite is Johnny. Like the 2510 is the first tractor that I learned to drive that I didn't feel like I needed Mr. Brenner to teach me every time I hopped on it.
Right.
Like it was easy to figure out. And I loved that when you had to shift, like you had to really shift, like get it into gear and then slam it over and then get it up into gear. And you could never go into third gear because if you went into third gear, then it'd just slide down the hill and you die.
That's
So
since
Johnny was
been
always
fixed.
You just made me feel the ultimate girl power, Mrs. Brenner.
loved that tractor.
That was amazing,
I
right?
feel so awesome on that tractor. I'm like, yeah, I'm on a tractor.
Put your shoes on, girls. There's glass everywhere. That was beautiful.
Not shoes.
That was beautiful.
Just steel toe boots.
I love it. I love it.
Oh, it's
Well,
terrible.
I thank you both again. Just a couple things. Thank you for showing us some of Alaska and talking to us about Alaska. It's a place you love. We go there. You go there usually a couple times a year because you have a lot of family, and I go there with you each Christmas. Unfortunately, this year we're not going to be able to go there for Christmas because of COVID and because of all the problems. So everyone's trying to live with that. Behind you, though, you have kind of a tribute to Alaska, right? Which is in your library at the intermediate school.
I do. I painted some trees, and it's my little tribute to Alaska. My Northern Lights picture.
Well,
Makes me feel
we
happy.
all those photos Mrs. Brenner showed were very nice. I have my favorite photo of Mrs. Brenner that I'd like to show before we end.
Oh, I love it.
I have this here at my desk to remind myself of how much I appreciate her and how she's silly and fun. So I always keep this here with me in my office. So I needed to show a Mrs. Brenner photo as well.
My favorite.
And I just want to let you know that I always tell Mr. Brenner that he should appreciate Mrs. Brenner too, because she's awesome and I appreciate her as well.
Oh, you guys are awesome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime. We're always excited to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. All right, students, we're going to play the Alma Mater, and we hope you have a good day today and get a bunch of work done.
Get online, kiddos. Get online.
O Trojans, list to our joyous song in praise of the red and white, and honor your alma mater as long as you dare to be true and do right. The good times we've had as the days speed away will hold in memory dear. We'll honor our high school forever and day. For our dear THS we will cheer.
Have a great day, everyone.